Hi friends! Today I have gotten three sets of core. It's the introductory set, which is your base colors, the earth colors, and the high chroma set. Now, I live in Norway. These are expensive sets in Norway, but every year there's a watercolor sale in the local art supply stores, and all the paints from Core were 30% off, so I decided to buy it. So today we're going to use one of these tins to build a watercolor set. We're going to fill our full pans, and the reason I'm using full pans, I prefer to use them, but also they are easier on your brushes than having the small pans. Um, so that's why we're using them. We're gonna swatch the colors on a pretty big sheet of watercolor paper. This is a 30 centimeters by 24 centimeters Hanemule cotton paper. And I wanted bigger swatches because I want to see how they move in water. And these are supposed to go very crazy in water compared to other colors because of the binder that Core uses. So we're just gonna empty one of these, start putting them into this. Unfortunately, I've forgotten where my magnet tape is. So we're just gonna use tack, or as we call it in Norway, teacher gum. Now, the core tins have these wells in the lid, so you can use the tin as your mixing surface. And now I've gotten three, so even though we're gonna put the tubes afterwards with all my other tubes, I might be able to make some extra sets of other things because the tins seem good. So we're gonna start with filling our pans. If you haven't filled pans before and you're wondering how to do it, it's fairly simple. What you have to be aware of is that you can get like binder separation when you're emptying your tube. Now, I don't know how that works with Core, seeing as how it's not a binder I'm used to, but what you keep with you when you're filling it in is just toothpicks, so you can mix an eventual binder separation together. It's good to have like a paper or a cloth. I prefer to use just old flannel cloths that I have lying around since I had small children. And that's pretty much what you need to fill them. So what you do, you fill them, you let them dry, and they'll work as an ordinary pan color. And if you buy your watercolor in tubes, you can refill your pans indefinitely. So it's in the long run a less expensive way of doing this hobby. So we are going to start with filling our pans. I've already marked them, and then we're gonna stick everything into this one, I think. Let's just take this one off, and then we have everything. So this is Naples yellow. Sure. This one's ready. I might not need to lift them, but it's always good to have them ready. We're going to see if they spill out a lot. It does, but it's not. And if a watercolor that you have filled from a tube, if it cracks on you, that's not a problem. If it's not perfectly nice in thing, that's not a problem. It will still work, and that's all you kind of need, is to know that it will work nicely. Transparent brown oxide. We're going to go through what pigments these things have when we start doing our swatches. So far with these two, there's been no separation. And the tubes have been easy to open. None of them have been hard in the tube so far. We're only on 2 though, so that might change. And yes, you do get, let's see, there we are, mucky when you do this. But that's fine. Okay, this one isn't bursting out. Let's see if we can do it like that. And you'll see that there is a lot of difference with how they fill the pan, because some will just go nicely and even themselves out, and then you have like the transparent brown that stays kind of chunky. But it's all the same when it comes to the quality of the paint. You don't have to worry about it looking perfect. Raw umber, getting my pan ready. It's bursting out. That's something you have to be aware of when you're doing this, at least for the first time. The paints will often just be bursting because a lot of companies, and absolutely seemingly core, fills their tubes pretty much as they can, which is a good thing, at least with something that's as expensive as core. Then we have indigo, one of my absolute favorite colors. I'm looking forward to seeing how this one. Oh, you see, I just ran for the tube. And in the last one in the earth set is sap green. It over it in case it didn't burst. Oh, a little bit of binder separation when I started pouring, but that was very little. Keeps going. I'm gonna try to. There. Not fast enough for these tubes. We're gonna fix that one a little bit. It's alright that I don't mind a mess, but this turned out very messy. So if you get binder separation, you just mix it with the toothpick and everything turns out all right. Also, you do get the pan to look nicer when you've done that. Okay. I didn't put the dirty ones on this. One of the reasons I'm not filling them too full is also because I want to be able to like easily put the tack on and get them into. Wait, we're not going to fill it right yet. We're going to leave it because I want to see, after having swatched it, which colors look nicer in which placement. So the Venetian red is going to have a tack on it. I'm just kind of ready for when we're done. Okay, let's open Introductory set. So Hansa yellow light. Whoops. Yep. That's a lot bursting out of the tube. We're gonna keep it over here while I get the lid. Now I'm used to having some burst out, but the majority of the core has been bursting out of the tube. Hero, light red, not red light. Again, just bursting. So clearly a warm red, at least from the color of this. You can't really judge or tell before you've started making swatches. Permanent alizarin crimson. Oh, this is very hard. As I really have to squeeze hard to get this one out. So while we don't have binder separation, we are going to use the toothpick to kind of try to level this. This felt more like squeezing out a thick oil paint than a watercolor. Trusty toothpick. And I'm not sure if you can see, it is so hard. Or not hard, but really, really thick and dense. And I think I might, when this has dried, just try to squeeze out as much as I can from that tube, because I'm a little bit worried that it might keep hardening. And at the end, I won't be able to actually use it. Burnt sienna. No movement from the tube. It's a lot easier to squeeze out. Ultramarine blue. And like I've said, if you do this, and even if it's just because you don't like the way they form in your pans, you can just use the toothpick and I will level it out. It's not necessary for the quality of the paint, but if it helps you like have a better painting experience, then of course. So phthalo blue green shade. Bursting. As you see, keep the pan very close to you when you're doing this, at least with this brand, because they are eager to go. Just gonna use this to like tidy up around a little here. It's not a problem to get messy tubes, but it can stick to the cap and make the cap harder to open. Okay, so that was phthalo blue shade. So we're down to filling our last set of the high chroma. And we're starting with cobalt teal. it over in case it bursts. It doesn't, we have a little bit of pigment separation. It is bursting now, but it gave me a few moments. It's not a lot of pigment separation. It was just in the few first like drops of the paint. There we go, cobalt clean. Green gold. Okay, no bursting, which I'm starting to appreciate, even though I know it's good because the tubes are full. Just makes my job a little easier and more enjoyable. I really like doing this, but it is a messy job. Quinacridone gold. Oh, bursting. There we go. Okay, we try to. As you see, it keeps going. We're just gonna put it on a corner and close up our tube. Dioxazine purple. Again, we're keeping the pan underneath because they have been bursting. This one isn't. Just easily fill. Then we have quinacridone magenta. Okay, no separation, no bursting on this one. I won't know about separation until we do this, but it's good. So like I said, separation isn't bad or dangerous. It can be annoying, and you have to kind of prepare yourself for it when you're getting ready to fill your pans. Just like have a cloth, have toothpicks at the ready. I think the brand I have that has had the most separation issues has been Rembrandt. It's a good paint, but you have to be aware when you're filling pans. So the last one in the high chroma is the transparent pearl orange, rearing to go. There we go. Okay, gonna put the cap back on. I'm gonna pause and go clean up my fingers, and I am gonna use the toothpick a little bit just to kind of even out some of these. And then we're gonna do the big sheet of color swatches. We're gonna try to find the system we want in our palette and go from there. My hands are cleaner than they were, and we are going to start doing the big swatches. I have also gone into all of the pans and just used the toothpick to make sure that everything is nicely mixed and a little bit more even. There's still some that you will see looks a bit messy, but that's not really a problem. Like I said, when it comes to watercolor, you can use cracked paints, things that look almost destroyed, and it doesn't matter that much when it's a watercolor. So we're going to do our big swatches, and I want to do a wet and wet swatch just to see how they work. And then I'm planning on doing just a stripe down after they've dried to get to see how they layer. So we're gonna start with wetting our test surface. And then getting some paint. Okay, so yellows is usually a color that will explode. So it's hard to see if this one explodes because it's a core or if it's because it's a yellow. They tend to be pigments that move a lot. But it's fun. You see it kind of doing the spider webbing, even though everything is wet. So we're starting this line. I got carried away and started swatching before explaining, is the their basic set, their introductory set, which is your basic colors, your trios, or in this case, it's not really that because you only have one yellow, which is a mid-range yellow that you can use for many things. Um, Then we have the earth tones here and the high chroma set here. So this was Hansa Yellow Light. It's pigment yellow 3, and it has a light fastness rating of 2. And you're gonna see that core is a little bit inconsistent with what they use to rate their light fastness because they'll use a system of 1, 2, etc. But then I suddenly start using light fastness rating good and excellent on other things in the same pack. So we'll see what that means. I'm guessing that a good is their 2 and an excellent is their 1. So wetting this and grabbing some Pyrrole Red Light Pigment Red 255 and a light fast rating of 1. That is fun. I need to put more water on the other swatches because that is fun. I'm gonna leave it at that and then like do the layering test on top here, I think, when it's dry. Okay, permanent alizarin crimson, pigment red 117, light fastness rating good. Trying to make this very wet. I'm not entirely sure yet if these guys go. Oh, yeah, they do spread a little bit more, but we are testing colors that often spread so far. Reds and yellows can spread a lot, though this is a lot. So we're gonna test with this. This is burnt sienna, pigment brown 7, light fast rating 1, or I'm guessing excellent. Usually is with pigment brown 7. But this doesn't tend to be a pigment that kind of runs away with you. It tends to be not sedentary, but not crazy. Okay, the camera is having a hard time picking it up, but it is moving. It's like the mass tone stays where you put it, and then it kind of stretches in a lighter hue. Oh yeah, it is moving quite a lot. Ultramarine blue, pigment blue 29, light fastness rating 1. Also a pigment that doesn't tend to kind of explode. Not to say that they won't move in wet and matte, because all watercolors do in wet and matte, but they don't tend to like explode on the page. I'm doing my swatches so much better than I usually do. It's a bit disconcerting. Oh, I'm a little bit afraid to lift this because I have all the pans on it, but we're gonna try. Yeah, that was immediate. Just a mass tone kind of staying where it is, and then this intense explosion of lighter hues. So this is making my swatches a little bit messier than I usually make them, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun. Phthalo blue-green shade does tend to explode a little bit more. So this is pigment blue 15:3, which is the usual phthalo blue green shade tone, also often known as like the paint brand blue, like Windsor blue or peacock blue. Try not to get globs. Same exact thing. They put the mass tone stays, and you get this pretty beautiful light. Oh, and the spider webbing is happening here. I'll try to lift this again so you can see. There. It kind of makes these veins. I would imagine this being a very fun paint to use if you're doing wet and wet, not fully realistic or figurative, where you can just explode in color. So we are starting on the earth tones set, and we're starting with Naples yellow, which is a triple pigment mix. This is pigment brown 24, pigment black 7, and pigment white 4. Now, a lot of companies do mix this with a pigment white, but I'm not entirely sure if I have Naples yellows that have a black mixed into them. Grabbing some paint. That is a fairly delicate one going on the page. It might turn more opaque, but usually Naples yellow is very opaque. Yeah, we're just putting on some more to get the normal effect of it. But this one you could go fairly light with if you want. Just making room above here to keep my system of the kind of what paint goes where. And trying not to flip them around while they're wet, because that it would be bad. Transparent brown oxide is pigment red 101, and I've said it before, pigment red 101 does a huge range of different kind of earthy tones of reds and browns, and differences in opacity and everything. It's a very fun pigment. So putting some on. So it's doing the same thing as the other ones, but kind of the lighter hue exploding down on the page, while the mass tone stays. Venetian red, also a pigment 101, pigment red 101, light fastness 1. I forgot to mention light fastness on some of these, but they're all, with the exception so far from Phthalo Blue, has a light fastness rating of 2, which I'm guessing means good. The other ones that I've done below are all the light fastness rating of 1. Okay, so Venetian red, light fastness rating of 1. And I even see it exploding into my brush. Oh, it won't focus. Let's see. Okay, so it does kind of, when I'm tapping it here, it just shoots into my brush. That is a better color for you to see that. I'm going to put it here as well and see. In this kind of as light as it is now, by just putting it on a little bit, it looks like a Potter's Pink. Now we're going to put some more on because this is a Venetian red. They tend to be very opaque. And there you can more see the opacity in the middle here, but it shoots out like a flower. And this is not a pigment that usually shoots out. This is a denser kind of solid pigment. It tends to stay where you put it in other brands. Raw Umber is pigment brown 7 with a light fastness rating of 1. And this has just been in the pan for a few minutes, not long. Just paused to clean my hands, and it's already forming the kind of. So it's shooting off, but not as visibly as some of the others. What's shooting off from this is very faint in coloration. Oops. Okay, that was just water. So that's not a problem. My favorite kind of pre-made color, or one of them, I do have some indigo. This one is a pigment blue 15:3, which is your phthalo blue green shade, pigment black 7, which I think is not lamp black but ivory black, I think, and pigment violet 19. And I can't remember in my head what the pigment violet 19 is, but I think the mix is the same as Vincent. And I'm very excited to see if this will shoot off. And it does. Beautiful color, more muted than like your Delft blue or Idanthron blue. Indigos are a little bit more muted. And the last one from the earth tones is sap green. And sap green is a mixture of pigment green 36, pigment red 101, and pigment yellow 150. So pigment green 36, off the top of my head, it's the yellow shade phthalo green, I think. And with the pigment red 101 in it, like you see here, you can get pigment reds in many different varieties, but when you add a red tone to a green tone, and at least something that is pigment green 36, which would be, if I'm right in that being the yellow shade phthalo green, is an intense bright color. What the red does is mellow that out. Red will neutralize green. So it mellows that out, and then to bring back some brightness, you have pigment yellow 150, which is nickel acer yellow. So we're gonna put water on this. I've heard that the core sap green is beautiful. So far, my favorite sap green is Rembrandt's sap green. We can see it is beautiful. It really is. And from those pigments, you can just, it looks very natural while it's still a bright color because of the pigment 101 that kind of just mellows out the brightness of green. Sorry. Now we're going on to the high chroma set. And we're starting out with cobalt teal, pigment green 50. This is also an interesting pigment because it comes in a pretty intense variety of shades. You get these bright cobalt teals from it, but you also get dark, dusty cobalt greens. So we're gonna see adding our water. And like the others, they do explode, but not in bringing all the color down. It's bringing the tint of the color into the water. Then we have green gold, pigment yellow 129. Did I forget? I forgot more light fastness information. So raw umber, light fastness 1. Indigo, light fastness 2. Guessing it's good. Sap green. Where are my earths? I'll just check on the tube because I forgot to bring it in. Light fastness 1. Cobaltine, light fastness excellent, which I'm guessing means 1. Green gold has light fastness good. And like I said, pigment yellow 129. In the pan, it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a greener green gold. We saw the Winsor & Newton was brighter, leaning more to rich green gold from Daniel Smith. So we're gonna see what this looks like when it's on the page, because it's hard to judge these in the pan. They'll often be a lot darker in the pan than what they're actually like. Oh, I think that's more, it's the explosion. Does seem to be more the rich green gold hue than I've seen some of these being greeny, being more green tinted, like an olive green. Beautiful, beautiful colors. Quinacridone gold. Like I said, I have several favorites. Indigo, And quinacridone gold is absolutely another beautiful one. Really excited to try this one. This is a blend that we soon won't be able to get because it's pigment orange 48, and that's being discontinued if it hasn't already been discontinued. I've gotten some tubes of pigment orange 48 just to have them. Paint with them, not to store them. I paint with most of the things I have. And pigment yellow 115 Nikolai yellow. And you see immediately kind of the yellow does explode. And this is fairly similar to the effect you will have when you're using a Nicolasio yellow because they do explode. But again, we're getting these kind of spider veins here, which is not something you usually get. I haven't seen that very often before. This one has a light fastness rating of 2. I'm not entirely sure why both of these pigments would, in my mind, be fairly stable pigments. I wouldn't be afraid of using this. Dioxazine purple, pigment violet 23. Just gonna scooch this one a little. And this is gonna be my actual first dioxazine purple tube. I've never had it. I saw when we swatched Winsor & Newton, I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm very glad to finally have a tube. Intensely rich purple color. Kind of this royal purple. Like in Middle Ages, purple was such an expensive pigment because it was from kind of processed snails. And it's doing the same thing with the veins. Those absolutely stunning. It looks like bushes and trees are forming in the water. This is going to take some time to get used to kind of the explosion. I'm pretty sure that if you want to kind of have more control, then use wet on dry, not wet on wet. And that means that don't wet the paper like I'm doing, and make sure that when you're touching a paint with the wet paint, that the paint you're touching has already dried. So the accents in purple had a light fastness of excellent. This one also has that. This is quinacridone magenta, pigment red 122. Making sure it's very wet. Also formed a very lovely top to it already. The last one is transparent Pyrrole Orange PO71. I didn't used to be a big fan of oranges, and then I bought one of the Roman Schmoll sets, and it has a PO71 in it, and it was stunning, and I was sold. And now I really think I could use up a full tube of this pigment. And I'm saying pigment because it doesn't really matter that much the brand. The pigment will usually look a bit mostly similar, unless it's pigment red 101. But with cord, the thing you're paying for is the explosion of color. the movement in water. Okay, that's all of them. We're gonna let them dry. You can't really judge a paint while it's wet because there can be such a big drying shift. Some will mute down very much when they're drying. So the best way to kind of judge them is when they're dry. And we're also going to see how they layer by going over the top when they're dry with a line of paint. But while they're drying, we're going to start filling the palette. And I'm going to put these guys here next to me so I have a color chart to look at while we're deciding. And I'm going to get my tab. Let's open it fully so it doesn't. Now I use tack for this. Like I want to use my magnet tape instead, but like I said, I couldn't find it. But also if you're gonna have like an art show where you're not at, often if it's like a craft fair, you don't have wall space or you can't put nails into the wall unless it's framed and heavy. And if you're just putting your art into a whiteboard or cutout, this will keep it on the wall for you. Okay, so we're starting with yellows and we are starting with our Hansa yellow light. Can I do 6 in a row? No, I can't. Do 3. I can do 3. Let's do 3 and 3. Doing this. Doesn't matter what sets they're from. I kind of went set crazy. We're wanting to keep the basic set and the earth set. I just got this lid kind of locked in. We're going to try to undo that if I keep going there. So this is not necessarily the best way of keeping them, but I do have some tints that I've had the same tack in it for years. Okay, so we're going quinacridone gold, I think. And then the discussion is always me if I should my my green gold with yellow. I'm going to put it with a green. Okay, Hansa yellow, quinacridone gold, transparent pearl orange, and that brings us into pearl red light, which is our warmest red. Then we're gonna do, so the battery fully cut out, but we're back. So we have transparent pearl orange. We're gonna go pearl red light, permanent alizarin crimson, quinacridone magenta, and then to purple, dioxazine purple. So pearl red light, adding tack. I have made such a mess in here already. That's usually what happens with my tins. They tend to get very messy very quickly, but that's okay. Also getting a little bit worried about the spacing of how I'm doing this, but we'll see. I have squeezed paint into tight spots before. permanent alizarin crimson. Can we? With some force. Yes, we can. Get 5 in a row here. Quin magenta. So this is the way I like having them, is from yellow to your warm reds, to your cool reds, to your blues, to your greens, to your nature. Everybody wants their own, can do their own setup, and whatever works for you is perfectly fine. Dioxazine, I'm not entirely sure on the pronunciation. Purple. Now, I think indigo, even though I could argue indigo being in the nature colors, or browns, I mean. Indigo, ultramarine blue. And I use that because it's most red leaning, not most green leaning. I want the most green leaning to kind of be transitioning into my greens. Ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, green shade. Force this in here, whether it wants to or not. And then cobalt teal. And from cobalt teal, which is the kind of, in this case, let's see there we go. A kind of greenest blue tint. I think we're going to do green gold, and then sap green. And then I'll start on yours. Green gold. Sap green. Then we have our earths. And I'm starting with the lightest one, which is our Naples yellow. Then I'll go transparent brown, burnt sienna, Venetian red, and raw umber. Naples yellow, Venetian red. No, sorry. Naples yellow, transparent brown was what we're going with. Burnt sienna. Venetian red. And I put my entire finger into my green gold. The joys of palette making, you will get dirty. And then at the end, the raw umber. Also put my finger into the raw umber. There we go. Okay, so palette. And now tack isn't my first choice, but it's what I've been using for a lot of things. And it can stay good for a few years. Like I've changed out some in my main palette, which is just a big tin box filled with all sorts of pans. And I've had to change out a few, but most of them are still okay. And that's a palette that's heavily used. So I think this is going to be fine. Okay, we are going to go clean our hands. Then I'm gonna bring in the hair dryer just to make sure that this dries completely, and then we're gonna put one more line on everything. So I'll see you then. Hi everyone, we're back. Everything's dry. If you're worried about texting for dryness, because sometimes it will look dry but it won't be dry, use the back of your hand, and if it's cool, it's probably still moist at least. So, like I said, things change when they're drying, starting with this is our dry swatch of Hansa Yellow, Pyrrole Red, Permanent Glycerin Crimson, Burnt Sienna, Ultramarine Blue. That is beautiful granulation in the ultramarine blue. And our Phthalo Blue Green shade. This isn't usually a granulating color, but something's happening here, which isn't granulation, but some kind of very lovely texture. And we've gotten this, which doesn't exactly look like cauliflowering, but I'm not entirely sure what I would call it. Because we used a lot of wet and wet, we are getting more cauliflowering like here. But that's just for these swatches. Let's see, Naples Yellow. It's not what I would call a Naples Yellow. For me, this seems a lot more like a yellow ochre. And I would probably just use a yellow ochre instead of using a triple pigment mix, because this doesn't look like what I usually consider a Naples yellow. This is more muted than a normal Naples yellow. Transparent iron oxide, Venetian red, very fun. Let's see if we can get all of it. Something is happening in here. It's not necessarily granulation, but something is happening that's fun. Our raw umber, our indigo, which is just making these beautiful, looks like trees. We're gonna call it. This swatch is a winter landscape at night, all in its own. And this is the same landscape, but in summer with our sap green. We have another beautiful granulating color, our cobalt teal, our green gold, quinacridone gold, our dioxazine purple. We're getting a lot of these landscapes because of the spindling and webbing it does. Quinacridone magenta and transparent pyrrole orange. We're going to put one more, just a stripe of color on these ones in the top just to see how they layer. So we're starting with Hansa Yellow Light. That seems to layer very nicely. And as you see, like you can go in very softly with a wet and wet, and then you can layer it when it's dry. But make sure that everything is dry when you're layering. And also some paints that are liftable, which tends to be true of most granulating colors, can be harder to layer. Can be done, but you can also be lifting up the colors underneath enough to muddy up your paint. So when you're doing it, make sure that you're using a soft brush, at least. Okay, Pyrrole Red Light. Permanent Alizarin Crimson. What, I got a drop of Pyrrole Red. There we go. Don't want to be contaminating these ones with other colors today. Most of my paints will get contaminated, and it doesn't really matter that much to me. But not while we're filming and sharing for you guys. You can try to seem professional-ish. Okay, so burnt sienna down here. So I'm being careful. Burnt sienna is something that tends to be easily lifted, so I'm being careful to not disturb, not rub, just going across. Ultramarine blue with granulating color, very liftable. Phthalo green, no, phthalo blue green shade. This you tend to be able to just layer and layer because it's a highly staining pigment. No matter what brand you're buying it from, your phthalos and your Gwens are highly staining. Naples yellow. Now this with its pigment white, and it's pigment white 4, I think it's zinc white. Tends to be very liftable. Transparent iron oxide. I have no transparent brown oxide. I just saw transparent brown in here and I thought it was transparent iron and went a little bit how and why. Venetian red. Tends to be very liftable. Raw umber. Indigo. This being mixed with phthalo should be easily layerable. Like I say, as long as you're being careful, you can layer most things, but you can't use a very hard brush or do a lot of movement if you want them to not lift. Sap green. Transparent pearl orange. I'm sorry, I jumped this side for some reason. Let's be crazy and go this side down. That's fine. Quinacridone magenta. Like I said, this is a quinacridone, should be very easily layerable. But I am being careful with all of them. Dioxazine purple. Quinacridone gold. Green gold. And cobalt teal. This is often harder to layer because it's granulating and liftable. But we're being careful. Oh, hold on. They met up here. Gonna do that to stop it mixing more. I'm not gonna undo anything, but we're just doing a Okay, now I'm going to let this dry, but those are the paints from the core set. And just looking at it now, one of the things that you tend to get is I can't see any of them doing anything very odd with the layering. Even though the layering isn't dry, you get like from this one, it gets more intense, but it's not like a perfect layering with the granulation. But the other ones do seem to be nicely layered. The oxygen purple one, very dark and layered. So once again, the sets that we filled. So it's the earth tones, the introductory, and the high chroma set. And it's made us a nice tin of watercolor with our painting wells and 3 more boxes that we can use for something else. So we're going to mark this one that it's the actual core. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely day.